Hi friends and family, I hope you're all doing well. This video is going to be a little different from the ones I've done so far. That is because we are coming up to our 5-year anniversary, which means that it's also 5 years ago that I've separated with my ex. And I am noticing there are a lot of thoughts coming up. It's been 5 years of healing, and I feel that the final thing I need to do is just tell my story so that I know it's out there and I can just let it go and let it be the past. So I thought, I'm just gonna make a video to just let you all know my life story, my past, and what makes this relationship so special and so dear to me. And I have my laptop here because I've written down my story because it's quite a long one and I wanted to tell it properly. So you might see me looking here at times just reading out my story. That's because I have it here. Yeah, this is my backstory to let you all know why this relationship and this wedding is so special to me. And making this video is part of my healing process, and I just wanted to share it with you. So starting off with my childhood, I was a very imaginative, happy-go-lucky, chubby kid, and I was very much protected by my friends and family and my classmates too. I am the oldest of 3 children, and when I was 10 years old, we moved to Almere from Amsterdam, which is about a 30-minute drive away. The Netherlands is quite small, so it's not that far, but for a 10-year-old, having to live behind your friends and your neighborhood and your school and everything, for me was quite something. This time around I was not so lucky at school, and I got bullied quite a bit for my weight and the fact that I was not very good in defending myself. This continued throughout high school until I went to college, where a shy, guarded, insecure me finally met some good people again who gave me a safe space to come out of my shell and starting developing myself again, which was quite nice. Funny fact, this is where I met Robin in 2006. We went to the same school and we're in the same year, doing the same course, so that was quite funny actually. Around that time my mother pushed me to try out for an acting job during the Halloween season of a Dutch theme park, and here I made even more friends. I found my soulmate at the time. I had my first boyfriend. I had the time of my life, and I lost some weight. I was discovering my independence, my sexuality, what made me me. I was quite late with my puberty, and here I could just literally just live it out, and I had a blast. It was amazing. The first time living by myself was at the age of 17. I was living with my colleagues, my age, in a bungalow at the bungalow park that bordered the theme. It was all one major thing. I didn't finish college, unfortunately, so I worked full-time for a while, which was fun. Then my relationship ended, and after a while I moved away from the bungalow park and found a new college with student accommodation in another city called Zwolle, where a lot of my friends lived at the time that I met at the theme park. It was about an hour away from where my parents lived, and yeah, it just felt like independence. I was doing my thing, I was living life, and I absolutely loved it. New Year's Eve 2008 until 2009, I had a drunk chat with Robin, and we dared each other to a quote-unquote naughty date. And the next day I went over to his house. This could have been the start of something, as we were definitely attracted to each other, but it didn't go as we planned, and I was very embarrassed when I left his house, and I didn't contact him for a while and he didn't contact me, so we kind of left it there. By this time my best friend and I started experimenting with smoking grass, which is legal in the Netherlands, and brought me to coffee shops, which in the Netherlands are not actually cafes to get coffee. You have to be over 18 to get in, and here you can buy your grass, smoke it, have a coffee or a tea or a soda or something and socialize with other adults. It's a place for smoking, really. I was 19 at the time. I was just smoking over a year now, but not daily yet. I just needed to get over the heartbreak of me and my first boyfriend separating. My best friend needed to find a way to drown some childhood trauma that he had, and smoking grass, partying and drinking alcohol was our preferred method of doing so. So yeah, we were young and we were doing some partying, smoking some, drinking some. This was the background where I actually want to start today. Because it was at the coffee shop where, through a friend of mine, I came into contact with a 30-year-old Englishman who is currently living and working in the Netherlands. I was, and still am, a huge fan of Harry Potter, the English language, and the English film industry. I was an inspired filmmaker at the time, and I'd been dreaming of moving to England to pursue a job in the film industry there. I had at that point also made my first fantasy film starring my then ex and Robin, which is also quite funny. I might be able to share a little bit of that, but yeah, that was that was very funny. And I enrolled into college for media and entertainment, which was doing well. What I produced was all right. I'm just not very good at time when it comes to finishing projects in a time frame. My best friend had left for Italy for a couple of months for an entertainment internship on an Italian camping. And I was home alone for the first time in forever, because I'd always lived with people, and now I was by myself, and it left a gap that I needed to fill. So this led me to find another smoking buddy. And I entered up at the house of the stoner friend that originally introduced me to the coffee shop and to the English friend of his that I mentioned earlier. Apparently they hang out often, and therefore I hang out with him too whenever I was there. And this Englishman started offering me drives home so I could stay later, not having to rush for the bus, as he was living in a different part of the city. He had asked me out once, which I had politely declined, but he told me later in his own words that he didn't take no for an answer, so he still tried to pursue me. So he made it a mission to get to know me better and started offering me rides to the middle of nowhere. We would spend hours listening to music, smoking, drawing. He was into poetry, fantasy, drawing, and nature. And we met some common grounds where we built a friendship, which quickly grew quite physical. And I guess you could say we were in the early stages of a relationship, where he actually called it something, when I turned 20. So when all this started, I was still 19. Bank holiday, I wanted to visit my best friend in Italy. And this man told me that he would drive me. So we drove to Italy, which was actually really cool. When we got there, I jumped into my best friend's arms, and later this man told me that actually made him quite jealous, because the affection I showed my best friend didn't match the affection I showed him at the time. He at that point worked on a Dutch farmer's land after he left his wife in England. The divorce at that point wasn't finalized, but I'm not allowed to judge that or anything. But he wanted to travel Europe in his classic van. And it had broken down in the first country he visited, which was the Netherlands. He was living in his van on this farmer's land, and he could work there for the money to have his van fixed. What I didn't know at the time we met was that he had a girlfriend, and the moment he met me, he dumped her to be able to pursue me. And she, for this good reason, really didn't like me at first, which I can understand. Unfortunately, I had no idea. I wish I did, but I didn't. So I thought her interaction with me was weird. But then when I found out later that she got actually dumped for me, that sucked. And I wish I knew that. Anyway, within the first month of our relationship, he lost his job, got bullied off the farmer's land, together with one of his colleagues and close friends, and they were now homeless. And me living in a 4x8 meter student accommodation didn't want to see either of them homeless. So naive me invited them to live with me for the time being. His friend lived in a classic van on the parking lot and had electricity through a cable from my apartment to the van. He could use my bathroom, my shower, my washing machine and my kitchen if he needed anything, and he slept in the van. My new boyfriend shared my tiny apartment with me till he could find something on his own. And then, through neglect of protection, I got pregnant. I'd only just turned 20, only known this man for like a month and a half. I was still going to college, I was smoking and drinking, and I didn't have the living arrangements fit to raise a baby in. So I made the decision to end that pregnancy, and he supported it. And my mom went with me to the appointment because I felt uncomfortable taking him with me. I barely knew this man, and I thought it would reflect strangely off me if I bring him with me for some reason. Anyway, as my contract with the student accommodation I lived in came to an end, I was lucky and I got given a 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a 10-story building. And the friend of my then boyfriend moved with us, because he still lived with us, and moved into my storage unit, which was great. And he stayed there for approximately a year before he left, maybe a little less, I can't remember properly. But yeah, he actually lived with no heating in my storage unit, on a mattress. Somewhere I feel guilty. On the other hand, I'm like, this man was, I believe, like 15 years older than I was. He was a grown-ass man. I was a young adult. It was his choice. I don't know. I'm not even going to go into that. My income was my school allowance and student loan that was paid directly to me. Since he was from England, he was not allowed any employment benefits from the Dutch state. So we lived from what I had, which included health and rental allowance. But on a monthly basis, it did not support our addictive lifestyle because we were still smoking at the time. He was smoking grass from the age of 13, and I very quickly adjusted to his amount of smoking and started smoking on a daily basis. He occasionally got money from his father back in England, but when that was gone, we struggled financially. So he suggested that we start looking for work. And I was the first one to pick up a job at a local petrol station. And he stopped looking and did nothing, really. I changed schools as I got kicked off for attendance and progress issues. And I started even lower level education in the hopes that I might actually finish something. This, amongst other things, caused tension, and after we had a huge fight, he impulsively asked me to marry him, which actually kind of pissed me off even more. He had no ring, no romantic location or circumstance. He didn't want to lose me, and so he wanted to marry me, put a ring on it, so it was harder for me to walk away. I reluctantly agreed to the engagement, but I was not ready to get married yet. We did eventually pick a 25-euro ring, my choice. I don't like expensive jewelry, because I tend to lose it. And we didn't have the money for anything expensive anyway, so, it's just a simple silver, pretty ring. Mind you, I was 20 years old, going to school and working, paying for our living arrangement, our water, electricity, food, and our addiction, and his friend too for a while. We weren't the cleanest, so we often lived in a mess. And when we would have visitors over, I would start cleaning the house thoroughly. He would help, but it never on his own initiative. I remember when I was on my knees, scrubbing the kitchen floor, when he asked me why I would only do so when friends would come over, and to this day it still stings because I have never ever seen him scrub anything, but apparently he expected me to do so, which red flag. Anyway, our relationship was up and down. We had some highs, which we lived off of, because for the main part I was extremely dissatisfied with what we had. He didn't work. He sat at home all day smoking grass and playing his gaming console. He wouldn't clean unless I was there to help him, and he called my taste in music, in films, and my behavior childish. When he came to making decisions, he would always know better because he was older than me and had more life experience. And the only thing he would actively support me in was my creativity, and that I am pretty gifted when it comes to graphic design and other creative stuff. I'm good with my hands, and he liked that because he could benefit from it. So yeah. His circumstance, he would weaponize it against me. The fact that he had a terrible start in life, that his adoptive parents never taught him to take care of himself, the fact he had no job, no house to live in, he painted himself as temporarily relying on me. I knew that as long as I was under the influence, I accepted mostly anything. Also, the fact he didn't speak Dutch and didn't learn it because it was exhausting meant that we were always communicating in English. I spoke it, but it wasn't my first language, which meant that I often had trouble with expressing myself to him, and he would win arguments most of the time and then complain that I didn't express my thoughts to him properly. And when you hear me speak English right now, it is pretty good and I don't have a hard time expressing myself anymore, but that's because reasons. At some point, I tried escaping by writing a book about getting back together with my ex. I wrote this whilst high in a coffee shop. At times, I should have been at school, so I didn't have to clarify to him what I was doing all this time sitting there. I even told him that if my ex would ever turn around and tell me that he wanted to get back with me, I would leave him in an instant. And he didn't care. He literally said, I'll take that risk. He knew my ex is gay and there was zero chance that would ever happen, although I tried. I had this story that I wrote published, and I had my ex read it, and he agreed with the publishing, but that was it. I even cheated at the time. I'm not proud of it. I was hoping to maybe find someone else to have a solid reason to leave him, or someone to have my back or something. And I told him that I cheated on him, and he forgave me. I also tried direct methods. I mean, at some point he told me that would I ever break up with him, he would take his own life, which is not okay. You cannot threaten suicide in order to have someone stay with you, but that's what he did. Even though in the first 4 years of our relationship, I broke up with him 4 times, like once a year. There was a time where I just reached my limits and I broke up with him. And every time he had nowhere to go. He had no house to go back to. He had no money to go anywhere. And he knew that I wouldn't just throw him on the streets to become homeless. And every time I would give him time to find himself somewhere to go, he would just stay put and waited it out till I gave him another chance, and then a year later I would break up with him again. I even left for a month at some point to stay with my sister in the hopes, that a little bit of distance would make a difference. But he just started living bachelor in my house until he would convince me to come back. His biological mom even stayed in my house at some point after we invited her to come to the Netherlands, and I believe we paid for her tickets too, which ended fantastic in her threatening my life. Afterwards, she left early to go back to England and then started threatening us and contacting my friends to try to get them to turn against me. But my friends know better, so that didn't really go anywhere. But it was interesting to say the least. Anyway, after my first pregnancy, I had an IUD placed to prevent any further unwanted pregnancies, and after 4 years we started talking about having a baby. Please don't ask. he was adopted and he really wanted some blood-related family of his own that was not his crazy mum, which I can understand. And being aware of his past, me feeling sorry for him, and the thing that I've always wanted to have a baby at the age of 25, to continue sort of like a little family tradition. My grandma had my mum when she was 25, my mum had me when she was 25, and I wanted to continue that, to have, well, at least my first child when I was 25. Maybe it can be a girl, and then, you know, we can keep that tradition going. So we agreed on trying for a baby. We also wanted to leave the Netherlands to move to England, and so he left first to find us a home to live in, and I would try to finish school, which should have taken about 1.5 years, but it already took 3 years. In other words, it wasn't going well. Anyway, I had one condition when it came to having a baby, and that was that we both would stop smoking, and he agreed. I mean, you have to take responsibility, right? Anyway, he would regularly travel from England to the Netherlands to spend time with me and to try to get pregnant. And after a few months, it worked. I had some morning sickness, but it wasn't too bad. And when school eventually told me that I had to retake the whole course over again for the 3rd time, I was so fed up with everything that I left the Netherlands to move in with him. He was working for a construction company and had found an attic that we could stay in for a while with an old friend of him. This guy rented space for people to make some extra money, and I'm not sure if this guy had any permits or anything like that, if it was even legal, but I didn't question it at the time. So yeah, I moved to England. This is where he started correcting my English, as we were now living in England, and I had to get it right. And I had to sort out my own stuff, because that would be the best way to learn. Completely forgetting that when we lived in the Netherlands, I sorted out all his stuff for him because it was in Dutch and he didn't understand a word of it, or the system. So I had to sort all his stuff out. And now that we lived in England, I had to sort my own stuff out because, you know, it was best for me to be able to take care of myself. It's the quickest way to learn. I hated the attic. I was so isolated from everything I knew. I lived with strangers, get used to living in a different country. My best friend had become very upset over me leaving him in the Netherlands, so he ghosted me, and I got sick, like really sick. Every smell, every flavor, everything just made me so sick all the time. I had no appetite and I threw up all day, every day. It was awful. I couldn't stand the smell of cigarettes anymore, but I couldn't stop smoking grass as it was the only thing that gave me some sort of appetite and took the sick feeling away for a while. But you cannot compare the English grass to the Dutch stuff, and I didn't smoke it for fun because the taste was awful. And looking at it now, I feel really ashamed for smoking whilst pregnant. You know, I tried to get something against the sickness from the general practitioner, but he kept telling me it couldn't be that bad and it was completely normal and it should subside, but it didn't. And I felt like I wasn't taken seriously. And again, smoking grass was the only thing that helped with the sickness. So we sat there through the winter and spring, and then his father sadly passed away, and we only learned this information after a week because his family had no way of contacting him. We had to hear it through the barkeeper in the village that we stayed in. Him passing did give him quite a large inheritance that we could then use to buy ourselves a house up north, about 4 hours away from where we stayed. And honestly, I loved this house. I loved the countryside surrounding the village. I started focusing on decorating the baby room. We bought some really nice furniture and actually made ourselves a cozy little home, thanks to the inheritance money. I was still sick though, at a point that I was actually ripping muscles in my abdomen due to the pressure of the muscles contracting from the vomiting. It was so extremely painful, and that was when my GP would finally give me something for the sickness, and this wasn't even a month away from me giving birth. But this also allowed me to stop smoking the last few weeks of my pregnancy. My due date came and went, and I had to have an induced labor, which was horrific and left me with so much trauma physically and mentally. The umbilical cord was tied in a knot, and Liam was deprived of oxygen when he came out, and the doctors told me afterwards that he couldn't detect any signs of brain damage at that time, but Liam had suffered a substantial amount of oxygen depravity, so there was a huge chance that effects of this would show up when he'd grow older, which it has, by the way. Not major, we've been extremely lucky, but due to all the drugs and the artificial hormones that were put in my body to induce the labor, I wouldn't start milk production. And my body also never got a chance to empty my bowels prior to labor, which meant that I had over a week's worth of buildup in my intestines that had to come out at some point, and that was another agonizing process that took hours and ripped 2 of my stitches. Gave me another trauma. I'm laughing now. It wasn't funny. Anyway, after 5 days of little Liam not being able to feed, as I wasn't producing, my care worker telling me that it was all normal, nothing to worry about, just be patient. I kind of reached the end of my limits because Liam was sleeping less and less, crying more and more, and he was starving. I didn't get any sleep. Partner there slept through everything, and at some point I was just so ready to give up. I wanted to throw Liam out of the window and jump straight after him. The bedroom was on the 2nd floor, but that's beside the point. With Liam in my arms and me suffering a panic attack, I kicked my partner awake. He took Liam away from me and put him on the bed whilst getting a bottle of formula. And the face that Liam made when he was finally able to eat made my partner laugh and broke whatever was left of me. I can't believe I'm getting emotional once again. I had completely failed as a mother. I had smoked during pregnancy. I had taken so long delivering him. My body couldn't provide him with the proper nutrition, and I had just thought of throwing him out of the window and ending it all. I suffered postpartum depression, and it took a while before I could actually love Liam like I do now. I couldn't talk about breastfeeding without breaking down completely, and it took me over a year to get over that. And then next to this, health professional also kept asking us why we weren't married yet, and told us that if we married now, Liam would still be a child of marriage, which would make our lives that much easier, even though no one could properly tell me why. So I allowed myself to be persuaded and agreed to finally getting married after being engaged for over 5 years. He first wanted to ask my father for my hand. He said he wanted to do it properly as he was raised that way. But when he did, my father replied with, "Can I say no?" and left it there. Again, he didn't take no for an answer and would marry me anyway. And we had a free of charge Monday morning wedding. I was wearing a summer dress and had made a matching headpiece. We had gone through most of our money at that point, so we had no guests apart from our grass dealer and his girlfriend, who were witness to the wedding. And I tried to make the best of it and was a little disappointed to see him wearing a hoodie and jeans. We got married and wanted to have an early lunch after to celebrate, but everywhere was closed still, and we ended up in the swimming pool cafeteria where we had a sloppy sandwich and that was it. No rings because hubby dear worked. And I say worked because since we moved, he hadn't worked, neither of us. So we were living off of the inheritance money. But he worked in construction, so rings would not be practical. So we decided on a tattoo instead. Very pretty. I had a child with this man now, and I was determined to provide Liam with a stable home. I designed the tattoos, and the tattoo artist, looking back at it, was not a professional and didn't do a pretty job and managed to screw up the tattoos too. So we got them for free after realizing there was no fixing it. A couple of months after Liam was born, we properly started running out of money again. Hubby dear had the idea of started a carpentry business, and I designed him a logo. He got himself a work van where he put his logo on the side. He ordered work clothes with his logo and a whole bunch of good quality tools. But apart from slapping his logo on everything, he never actually did any proper promoting. No business plan, no contracts, no terms and conditions, and he never did any work. Even though he had put a lot of money into setting it up, he never pulled through and he never got his business off the ground. He also wanted to have his classic van that he still trailed behind us, even though it hadn't run in years now, all fixed up. So he had a brand new engine custom made. He had me design new chairs that he had custom made. He ordered new wheels and had a custom logo made. And he took the whole van apart and documented it for YouTube. Then had the body acid dipped to get rid of the old paint job and rust that was building up from standing in the rain. So he could pay someone to have it welded and painted, and he could then put it back together, which cost him so much money. And the van actually never got properly finished either. We were running on our last pounds, and I had to go find a job again because he had his business just waiting on customers who would never come. And I convinced him to stop smoking because we couldn't afford it. It was expensive. We didn't have the means to pay for it. And at that point in time, I was just so done with it. We did, and I enjoyed being clean again and clear in my head. And we were actually doing pretty well. But now that I wasn't stoned all the time, I didn't just accept everything, and I would argue a lot with him. I kind of resented him, and he didn't like that one bit, obviously. So as soon as I had been accepted for a care job in the area, he brought grass back home without discussing it with me first, and I got so upset because I was so relieved that we managed to stay clean, and now he'd brought it back in the home, and I haven't even started my job yet, and he wanted to celebrate. So yeah, I tried to stay off it, but being sensitive to addiction and having someone smoke around me, it was really hard to not give in, and I gave in. I love my work though. Even though I sometimes had to work 60-hour weeks, I thrive when I can leave the house and make myself useful. I once again was the sole breadwinner of our family, and he would work on his van or other vehicles he had purchased to experiment on. I believe at some point we had like 5 vehicles in the driveway. Our car, his work van, 3 other cars he bought to fix up and then resell. I believe he still had his classic van in the garage. But yeah, he wanted to do some fixer-uppers, and they were never fixed and were always sold for parts at a loss. But yeah, I loved being away from home and working. I hated having to come home. Whenever I was home, I would lock myself in my office to distract myself with creative stuff, writing and dreaming about, well, mostly my ex, who had become somewhat of an unhealthy obsession at that time. It helped me escape. Husband would obtain the grass, illegally I might add, smoking in England is against the law. And then he would determine how much I would smoke, even though I was the one paying for it. According to him, I smoked too much, and I had to learn to make do with what I was given. I did not agree with that and would often go behind his back to grab more. Poor Liam, in the middle of all this, was partly neglected at this point, being left in his room for long periods of time in a playpen with his toys. When my parents would visit, they would look on in horror, as I was working and hubby would leave him in there for hours. My parents would ask why Liam wasn't down here with them. And hubby would answer, I can hear him cry when he needs something. He's playing and he's happy up there. And I was depressed and trying to escape reality in every possible way. I have to say that besides all this, I was absolutely loving England. I would take Liam out for walks in the countryside. We would take him to local church to play with other children his age and to meet up with other parents. I do believe that when I had to work, Liam wouldn't go play at the church because hubby didn't take him without me. But yeah, he wasn't completely neglected. He wouldn't go hungry. He would get clean nappies and clothes and attention when he would ask for it. And that's the key point, because he was an easy baby, and if he didn't ask for it, he was just left there for long periods of time. But yeah, we would take him out with us, and my love for this little boy did grow and grow. But yeah, he definitely could have gotten some more attention and some more social interaction. I'd made friends at work, friends I still have till this day. Again, I loved my work, and through it, getting to go places. I love the country and its people. I love the countryside. I love the language. Hubby didn't like being back as much as I did, though. Probably also because he was used to a different part of England, in and around London, and we were far from London. He, without discussing with me first, mentioned in the presence of my parents that he wanted to move back to the Netherlands, and my parents jumped on this idea. They wanted to be able to keep a closer eye on me and our child, and wanted to be closer to their first grandbaby anyway. And it was them convincing me to return, and I eventually agreed, even though I didn't want to leave and felt pressure to do so. I was in love with England, and I hated having to go back, even though things in England didn't go as well as I wanted to. I really didn't like the thought of going back to the Netherlands. But I agreed, and my dad picked me and Liam up to take us back to the Netherlands, where I would spend time at their place whilst hubby dear stayed back to sell the house. I quit grass once again and started working in elderly care to support myself. Hubby in England didn't realize he had a right to benefits now that he had no income. And when I told him, he didn't believe me at first. Turns out he did. So he actually been on benefits for a little while. Me being clean started wondering if this wasn't actually the right moment to leave him. He had a house in a country where he came from, where he could get benefits and could get a job if he wanted to. And my parents were actually slowly pushing for it. But unfortunately, whilst Skyping with hubby and watching him smoke on the other end, I got tempted once again and went back to smoking grass. It made me feel so guilty that I was thinking of leaving him there, taking away his child and breaking up Liam's family. But eventually I did not like reuniting with him and everything after that. With the money from the house that we almost didn't get, because hubby got put in jail at Schiphol Airport for unpaid Dutch traffic tickets, which my parents then paid for, we bought a caravan-type bungalow in the middle of nowhere. I was hoping that living small would allow me to keep our living space tidy and clean, putting it all on myself, even though it was as much his responsibility as it was mine. But we moved there, me putting my heart and soul into making curtains and lampshades, recycling everything we had to make new furniture, turning the space into a little home again. Liam went to daycare and we both picked up jobs through an employment agency. I started working for the postal service at a package depot, throwing packages onto the sorting machine for 8 hours straight till 3 a.m. in the morning. Having to travel 20 kilometers or 12.5 miles distance by bicycle back and forth 5 times a week, regardless of the weather, to make it there because there was no public transport after 3 a.m. Hubby worked for a company that he actually quite liked. But after a month or so, the work had dried up and they told him that they couldn't take him on immediately because then they would have to pay the employment agency and they didn't want to do that. So they had told him to stop working for the agency and then after a year, they could legally take him on. So he stopped working for the agency and stopped working completely for that year. So I had to pick up a second job to make sure that I could support us. Because I had to cycle for over 2 hours in the middle of the night, 5 days a week, I had asked the hubby to keep at least his phone on sound in case anything would happen, and that if I needed him to pick me up, that he could do so. Well, the one time I really needed him was when my tire burst halfway through. And whilst walking in the middle of nowhere between miles of farmlands and fields, a car had pulled up. And the male driver insisted I get into his car so he could drive me home. Even though I had declined, after a while it got so threatening that after multiple attempts of me trying to contact hubby, I had to call the emergency number and the lady on the other end managed to scare him away over the speaker telling him the police were on their way. Hubby eventually called back and I was almost home, telling me he slept through the sound, and then he apologized, but that didn't make any difference for me. He confirmed once again that I really couldn't rely on him, although I felt stupid for thinking I could rely on him in the first place. Whilst I was working, hubby started building a garage that to this day doesn't have a roof. And he started breaking down the bathroom to rebuild a larger, more modern shower, which up to this day is not finished. And this was 2017, so you can do the maths. Liam went to daycare and got social interaction. And when I came home from work, hubby would tell me that on days Liam didn't go to daycare, he would have taken him for walks in the woods and stuff like that. So I was finally feeling like Liam was getting the care that he deserved. I would also make sure that in my spare time, I would spend time with him. I tried quitting smoking on multiple occasions now, but it was so hard when hubby doesn't support it. He would smoke in the car, but would then come back in the home, smelling of grass, tempting me so badly. Time and time again, I would fall back into addiction, especially because when I was stressed, he would mention me being stressed and offering to roll me a spliff to calm my nerves. He didn't like me sober because I didn't love him sober. When after a year, hubby applied for the job that he really wanted, and he got it, I worried about his working hours not being compatible with mine, and I asked him to make sure that I was still able to work. But unfortunately, he would come home later and later until the point where I had to quit my job. For the first time, I felt jobless, and this kicked off the biggest depression so far. I felt like I'd lost myself completely. I'd lost all my future dreams and opportunities. Had lost most of my personality, I lost my self-esteem, my confidence, my self-worth, you name it, I lost it. I would get Liam out of bed. I would get him a new nappy, get him dressed and fed. We didn't have a shower, so I would wash him with a cloth. I would make sure he was cared for, and then leave him in front of the TV and retrieve to my office to escape. The only thing I felt like I had control over was my weight loss. I would contain my hunger by smoking. I would throw up whenever I ate, and I got so skinny in such an unhealthy way. Hubby loved my new figure, never questioning how I got it, never questioning the excessive exercise or undereating. I would take Liam to play areas and made sure he got to play with other children, but I felt once again that I was failing as a parent. When it came to my hubby, I resented him all the time. He needed back rubs and strokes every night to be able to sleep due to a bad back, but would never give me any attention unless he wanted to engage in relations with me. He then tried to please me, I'll give him that. But I was already so disengaged that I faked it every time just to have it over and done with. I pretended everything just so I didn't have to explain to him why I didn't want to. I had no energy to tell him how I really felt. Did he notice? Yeah, he did. Then ask me what was on my mind, and I would tell him I was fine. And he was okay with that, apparently. I am so sorry if my seating position just changed. I ran out of phone battery, so I had to find myself a charger, and I hope I'm sitting in the same... Wait, let me just do that for a second, and I've got some more space here. Wow, this has turned out to be such a long video. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's just continue where I think I left off because I don't completely remember. But one day I was talking to my neighbor who lived in similar circumstances right next to us, and she could look straight into our living room from her kitchen window. I told her I was so ashamed that when I was the one working, hubby was able to take Liam out for walks when he didn't go to daycare and would be a proper stay-at-home dad, minus the cooking and the cleaning. But now that I was home and the stay-at-home mom, it was so hard for me to get myself to be a proper mom for Liam and give him the attention and emotional availability that he needed from me. And my neighbor asked me where I got the idea from that he would do anything with Liam whilst I was working, and I told her that he told me. She proceeded to tell me that he must be lying to me, as she only saw Liam in front of the TV all day every day once he didn't go to daycare anymore, and he didn't do anything with Liam. I did more now than he did when I was working, and for me that was just the final straw. Liam is special needs, as you might have noticed, and we were waiting for him to get into special daycare, and I had to make a decision now. Leave hubby now and start somewhere else before special daycare starts, so I didn't have to pull him out, or stay. Liam had already gone through so much, but was this family actually healthy for him? He was neglected, and I really feared that Child Protective Services would come knocking on my door one day and take him away, and to be fair, I would not have blamed them at the time. It was at this time that I got back into contact with Robin, who had asked me to start playing online Dungeons and Dragons with him, and he used it to flirt with me, but at that time I wasn't really responsive to it at all. We did get the talking though, outside of playing, and I started telling him everything. He was shocked and told me that I had to get away from this situation. He wasn't the only one though. All my friends started to voice their concerns, and I had already lost so many of them in the past that I tended to take their words a little bit more seriously this time. I remember a conversation with my mom where I told her that I didn't want to break up Liam's family, and that she also was strong enough to stay with my dad through the hard times, and that I really looked up to that. And then my mom said, but you have to ask yourself, do the positive in your relationship outweigh the negatives? Because in my marriage with your dad, they do, but does it for you too? And yes, it's hard having to break up Liam's family, but he can feel his mom being unhappy, and you have to think about the example that you give him. Is this the life and the future that you really want for him? And my answer was no. And that's when I knew I had to leave. My mom told me I just had to say the word and she would come to pick me up, so I asked her to pick me up. And that evening I told hubby I was leaving. And surprisingly enough, he let me go pretty easily. The only thing he really didn't seem to like is that we wouldn't do Harley Quinn and the Joker for Halloween in Amsterdam that year, since it hadn't been Halloween yet and I was leaving him like 10 days prior or something. I'd already gotten a costume, pretty sexy I might add, and he didn't like not getting to show it off to his friends. So yeah, I left, and Robin was there to catch me emotionally, and he became my safety net. Hubby had asked me not to have any relations with other men while I was separated from him, but I didn't listen to that. I left everything behind. My addiction to nicotine, to grass, most of my stuff. I agreed with hubby that I take Liam, and I took his essentials and most of our clothes. I cried briefly when we left the bungalow part we lived on, and that was the last time I cried for him. I was relieved, to say the least. Hubby promised to get clean as well, yet he never did. After 2 months, he told me that he expected me to have returned home by now, and that's where I told him I was not coming back. I was broken, and now I finally had time, support, and space to start healing again. I officially got divorced a year after I left, now ex-hubby. And from day one, I had the support from Robin to make hard decisions and then have him to lean on. In the beginning, I wasn't sure if I wanted to throw myself back into a relationship after everything I had just been through, but eventually it was pretty clear that it was love, and we got to give it a name. Robin didn't just embrace me, but Liam as well. I got a job that showed me what I was really good at, that challenges me to grow to my full potential. I started college again, which is doing great this time. I'm almost finished, and I have options to climb positions and make a career. Robin and I moved in together. And after threading the waters to see if and when I was ready again for a potential marriage, he asked me to marry him in a beautiful romantic way, and the rest of the story you know. October 19th, 2018 is the day I left ex-hubby, and the day Robin and I count as the start of our relationship, because we haven't been apart from that day onward, which means it's almost been 5 years, and for me it feels like I can finally close this book on the 9 years of what feels like trauma with ex-hubby. Mind you, I don't blame him for everything. Just the whole thing of us being together was not good for me whatsoever. I am thriving and feel like I'm finally healed. Liam is thriving and turning into his own little person. Oh my god, he's doing so well. The tattoo on my shoulder, that one, I will get removed after we get married, because I don't want my arm in the process of healing when I'm walking down the aisle. It's good to get this off my chest. It was the last thing I felt like I needed to do. So yeah, thank you for listening. I know it was a doozy, it was a really, really long one. I promised next video will be about happy things again, like Robin and Liam's wedding outfits and other awesome things I've been wanting to share but keep forgetting. Thank you for listening, letting me get this off my chest. I love you all. Hope you're doing great, and I'll see you in the next video.